Hey, welcome everybody. It is time for an Unleashed, and unlike most Unleashes where I just kind of rant, I got really nothing to rant about. I'm just really caffeinated right now because I've been drinking coffee all damn day long. I was getting ready for my discussion with Dr. Fuzz Rana, Dr. Hugh Ross, and Dr. Paul Davies that I just had on Agree to Argue a little while ago, and getting psyched up for that because I don't know if you guys really know, but Paul Davies was a huge influenced me when I was growing up. When I first read his book, it was called God and the New Physics. It had exposed me to things that I've just never even heard of before, like, like different degrees of infinities. It's like, what is this magic that you're talking about? So I'm a little bit caffeinated, but I thought I'd kind of give you my afterthoughts on discussion. I do got Leo in here. He's kindly joined me. He did watch the discussion, so I'll get his views on it, good, bad, or indifferent. Let me make sure they can hear you. You haven't said anything yet, but
I did have myself muted there. So
okay, yeah, you're working fine on my
sound test.
So, yeah. So, you know what? I'll just start with you before I give my afterthoughts on it, because I didn't really say much. Because again, I was listening to what Dr. Davies had to say because I was really I'm a little
in tune with it.
Yeah, well, I was like, this is one of my childhood heroes here, kind of thing. I mean, I grew up reading him and Isaac Asimov. Robert A. Heinlein, even though he wasn't much of a science communicator, but I mean, these are somebody that I did read a lot of, and the topic was fine tuning, and again, we didn't really get on the specificities of the fine tuning argument, and that's fine. It wasn't like the discussion that Dr. Luke Barnes and Dr. Alex Malpass had. It was more of just explaining a little bit about the basics of the fine tuning and why we thought that atheist and theist alike. I really need to look at the argument a little more seriously. Now, again, people can hand wave any argument away, but I find that when they just say, look, we didn't even talk about this, was funny, but when somebody just says, oh, look, Douglas Adams' puddle, analogy, fine-tuning bad, it doesn't do any, it's not a really great refutation of the argument because it's not really addressing the metaphysical accounting of why these constants that we have and why things are the way they are, such that allows for the manifestation of sentient life, especially specifically sentient life that can apprehend its universe through the weak anthropic principle, right? So,
yep.
So, what do you think of the discussion overall?
Well, first, I thought it was a really good discussion. While I agree with you that it didn't necessarily get into deep into the meat of the argument, I do think that there were a decent amount of good points that were touched on. The anthropic principle was brought up on more than one occasion, which I enjoyed hearing about that, just because it's good when that's actually brought up in these discussions rather than skimming over it, because I do think it has some importance to the discussion. As for the discussion that took place, I suppose that's all I can say for now, unless you want me to offer any criticisms.
Yeah, go for it. What I mess up on, what I didn't mess up on, what you have liked to see, what you did like. Go for it.
I do think.
Just remember, I can boot you any time if you didn't like it that much.
I do think Hugh Ross did make some decent points, but when we're discussing the fine tuning of the universe, my position on it is that the universe just isn't finely tuned at all. One of the main reason for that is that irrespective of the starting axioms or starting, not presuppositions, not axioms, that's what I'm looking for, the starting parameters for the universe, if you change them slightly, everything that emerges out of those could change. Now, there might be some symmetries in there where some things stay the same, and that might vary depending on what's changed and how it's changed. But whether or not a universe has life in it, if you change its fundamental constants and the way that it operates, you're going to change a lot of the stuff that comes out of that. So arguments that, well, I mean, if we changed all the stuff, life wouldn't exist, to me don't work. And the main reason for that is not just what I said, but also that I don't view life as having some sort of preference in the universe. I don't think that the universe is here for life to exist in it.
Well, you'd be against the strong anthropic principle.
Yes. I don't think that life is preferred in the universe. I don't think it's something that is necessary to the universe. I think it's something that just emerged out of the way that the universe operates, much like black holes or neutron stars or nebulae or all the other things. So, and again, this is my take on the issue. I don't think the universe is finely tuned. that brings up a whole host of questions that I would then have to ask. What do we mean by finely tuned? Finely tuned for what? How do we determine it? Is there a way to corroborate the methods by which we're determining this that show that it has some veracity to it? And for me, I just don't really think that when we talk about fine tuning, it's usually for life. And to me, that comes with the presupposition that life is preferred. Some people might work with that presupposition. I choose not to. I don't think
I don't think it presupposes it. I think it acknowledges that, whether you agree or disagree that we have a special place in the universe, it seems to be the case that we are alone in the universe as far as we know. What we do know is that we can apprehend the universe. We can not just describe the laws of physics, but we can use the laws of physics to do things. That's pretty unbelievable. To think that we're the only sentient creature that possibly could be in the multiverse that has that capability of doing it. So that needs to be accounted for. There has to be a metaphysical accounting. And I don't think anybody really should argue about that. I mean, even atheists or non-theists that say, hey, look, it is the way it is. That really doesn't explain anything, right? But I did thought that something was weird because they were talking about what could change and what couldn't change, right? And one of the things they said was like the gravitational constant. And, I didn't give any pushback on it. But I was thinking, the gravitational constant is intricately related to other natural units. When it comes to Planck length, when it comes to mass, when it comes to time, even when it comes to like temperature, the big G, the gravitational constant, is intricately related to these formulas to figure out how to. In fact, if you know two natural units, you could actually figure them all out, including the Boltzmann constant, if I'm not mistaken. But I think so. Yeah, so we got the electron charge. You have all these things that are just intricately related to each other. So if the gravitational constant changed, speed of light could change, h bar can change, the fine structure constant that would change all of these things, right? So I don't know how much variance we would have to say, okay, we could change gravity. Sure, it may not affect the stars in any really great manner, but it would affect the natural units. And as I pointed out on the show, what holds the atom together is the secondary strong nuclear force. So in other words, you have a strong nuclear force that's between the quarks inside in a nucleon, and so from whatever reason, that force slightly is larger on the scale than the nucleus size itself. That allows the protons and the neutrons to remain in the nucleus together rather than fly apart due to electrostatic propulsion. Because of course, like charges repel, and so protons should not hold itself together. But we know there's a force greater than those electrostatic repulsions and those charges. That is the secondary effects of the strong nuclear force. Now, if that had changed at all, if that wasn't as long as as range as it was, matter of fact, it's a very small range. After a certain point, there was no detection of the strong nuclear force. But if it was just slightly smaller, so you couldn't have even the ability to have complex atoms, anything greater than hydrogen. You couldn't even have helium at that point. You would have no stars. No stars would create fusion. No fusion. And as they were talking about, like the ability to create carbon or the carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen cycle, beryllium, lithium, and then you obviously want to be able to have the higher elements from these neutron stars that can come together.
Iron,
and form
nickel, cobalt,
not even
silver,
just that, uranium,
gold,
and plutonium,
platinum, uranium, strontium.
Technetium, all these things are formed by very huge interstellar catastrophes. Yeah, I guess you could say.
Neutron star mergers being primary ones.
Yeah, star doesn't just produce uranium. It's because of neutron stars that can collide with each other. So, I thought, Slam RN pointed out the same thing, that Davies said we could change the gravitational constant by 10%. And I think, I don't remember that exact number he used, but it seemed awfully odd because, again, all the other natural units would change just to some degree. Now, there's something called quantitative analysis, where if you look at a formula, and if you change one variable and you hold another variable constant, some of the variable has to change, right? So, for example, like E equals mc squared, quantitative analysis would be light is constant. So if I raise the mass, I got to raise the energy, right? There's a proportionality there. And so if I change these fundamental constants, especially with gravity, something else has got to change with it.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. Even if we wouldn't be able to describe it, because even if like the classical level, we wouldn't notice much of a change, if any change at all, if we change the gravitational constant. And I'm not saying that that would be the case. There could be classical level changes that we would see, but in the case that there weren't, I would still argue, I think it's the point that you're making is that at the quantum level of reality, at a more fundamental level of reality, there would still be changes, even if we weren't capable of measuring them or didn't have the models to describe them because we don't have a quantum theory of gravity. But those changes would still be present. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they all kind of did agree that there needs to be an explanation. I think that Paul Davies kind of, I was actually going to, explain this, and I didn't get a chance to. But let me try to run it by you guys. There are such things called transcendental arguments for God. And what a transcendental argument is basically, in a nutshell, is if something is a necessary condition or precursor for something's existence, and that does have existence, then whatever was a necessary precursor must exist as well. So in other words, if X is necessary for Y and Y exists, then X must exist. It's just a transcendental argument, and it's perfectly reasonable. It's a logical argument. And so the way I've heard theists argue this is if that these laws that we have described, whether they be logical laws or even metaphysical or physical laws, whatever the laws are that are transcendental, and I think there's an argument to be had for this. Not where I'm going with it, but as far as being transcendental, as Dr. Davies was talking about, okay, I can get into that, having a transcendental approach to that. However, it's funny because he did mention to me before we went on air that he kind of cited a mathematical Platonism, right? Which fine, right? There's some abstract reality that exists, that these numbers exist in, or some sorts. But the way the theist would run this argument would be this: if the laws of logic or the laws of the universe are such that they must exist at all times in all places transcendentally, and they're conceptualized, these are concepts, there must be a mind to hold the concepts at all times in all places, and that would be the mind of God. That's the way I've heard theists run this argument.
Yeah. Essentially, that if you're appealing to the laws of logic or the laws of physics or the laws of mathematics or anything, you're presupposing God's existence as a metaphysically necessary, or as somebody that we all know very well, and I'm not going to name because we all know him, a metaphysical primary must exist that grants those.
Well, they call it, like, if there's laws, wise are lawgivers. We call them laws, but they're really descriptions.
Yeah, that they are descriptive, not prescriptive. Yeah, our laws of physics describe what reality does. They don't tell reality what to do.
And as he pointed out, John Wheeler would have said, there's only laws if there's no laws, right? I mean, we know laws can be violated. We know that there's symmetry breaking. We know that, nothing is immutable in the universe. Matter of fact, the only real law of the universe that a lot of scientists would probably say is immutable, that I've seen, would probably be the law that information is conserved.
Yes.
That information is not either, destroyed or is not. It's even more fundamental than the law of conservation of energy.
Yeah. I've also heard that, albeit a statistical law, one that will hold true for at least, in its current form, for at least the next 1,000 years of human development, is the second law of thermodynamics. That despite being statistical, it's like,
there's pretty good evidence.
Avoiding this is really, really hard.
I mean, that's what we measure the arrow of time with is entropic, the entropy of the universe going up, because the second law says that any isolated system with a reversible thermodynamic process, the amount of unusable energy is going to increase in that isolated system.
Yes.
So in anything that we do, there's always going to be loss, and that's heat loss. And then that works for information too. In black hole theory, changes of information produces heat.
Isn't it information? Shannon information? No.
No, it's not Shannon information, because Shannon information
has
to do with the noisy channel.
Is it von Neumann entropy? Which one's the one?
Von Neumann entropy.
Is that the one in information theory?
Well, Shannon has information theory, but that's how much usual information you get out of a noisy channel. The minimum amount of entropy you have informational wise to transmit a message through a noisy channel. But when you have black hole theory, you have something called you're familiar with the holographic principle, right?
Yes. Okay,
so the holographic principle is basically the amount of information in a system is stored on the surface area of the system. Yes. It's the max amount of information that a system could have. And so, like, when it comes to entropy is just saying that the entire observable universe, the entropy of the isolated system, must go up for any process, including information changes. And if that information exists encoded on this boundary condition in what's called qubits, then if any of that changes, there has to be heat for that as well. I mean, think about this. When you got a computer RAM chip and that chip is being written over and it's changing information, it produces heat. Same thing happens in a black hole. That's one of the reasons why, according to the firewall paradox, when you go into the event horizon of a black hole, you should be annihilated. The amount of heat there, because of the information stored there and the amount of changing of the information, should evaporate you. You should no longer cease to exist. But in other theories, the math says no, it shouldn't bother you at all. That's the paradox. And so which is it? And they kind of resolved it with Susskind winning the bet for Hawking that it's both.
I was just about to say, I think Susskind beat out Hawking and say, it's kind of both. But there was something I wanted to, slight tangent, but it relates to what you said. And I think it's a really, really important point to make. And I just want to make this quickly. The fact that when we talk about information, and that when you move it or create it or destroy it, and I'm using the terms create and destroy here a little bit loosely, because I mean, in physics, obviously that's something that isn't really the case, but in information theory, there's a little bit of nuance there, but not much. Anyway, we always notice that when it comes to information, moving it, creating it, destroying it, all that stuff, storing it, we require physicality. It's intrinsically tied to thermodynamics. To me, I would argue that this is, quite frankly, maybe this isn't the right way to word it, but I would say this is a nail in the coffin to the idea that information is non-physical. Just nothing, absolutely nothing about a reality
I don't know if it's physical,
indicates
but it
that.
does have. But information does have physical changes, because changes in information will produce heat, so that it has a physical change.
I would argue that that makes it physical. That something non-physical shouldn't require like a physical thing to be stored in. You shouldn't have a maximum on how much information you could put in some physical medium if the information itself isn't physical. But there's a whole slew of arguments.
But that is odd that something that seems to be intangible is directly related to the amount of information that you can store on the surface area of the system, though.
Exactly.
I'm going to try to see if I can get you actually shown here. I don't know if I can actually do this though, but
information theory I think is really, really useful. And as we've sort of combined information theory and physics together, especially in our cosmological or cosmogonic models, quantum mechanical models, there's a lot of really, really interesting things there about the structure of our universe, the way that reality functions, how, what sorts of information we could have access to. All of this is just really, really interesting. If anybody is interested in it, check out the various models. Leonard Suskind's done some stuff. Sean Carroll, obviously, Stephen Hawking's done a little bit before his passing. I think Max Tegmark is another one that's done some work in some of those areas. There's a lot of really, really interesting work.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get Sean Carroll. See, this actual discussion we just had, we were looking in between getting Paul Davies and Sean Carroll, and I happened to want Paul Davies, and so they kind of went with that. But I would have been happy with Sean Carroll as well. But yeah, I mean, I like the way Sean Carroll approaches the fine-tuning argument too. He does make some good points.
So do I.
And we didn't get into that, unfortunate. But he does have a very good, at least a good argument as why a naturalistic explanation seems to be more parsimonious and what we would expect from a natural universe as opposed to a design universe. And there is a lot of randomness as far as, this chaos is why these numbers are the way they are. Why is Planck's constant the way it is? Why is pi even the way it is? There seems to be no, niceties about it. No. Yep. I mean, granted, I'm not saying it's not elegant. I'm not saying it's not beautiful. I'm just saying that if these natural units were solidified during the inflation period of the Big Bang, because that's what Paul Davies was talking about, and they just happen to be coalesced to what they are, although they could have been something different. We would expect them to be kind of all over the place in a natural universe, I would imagine, and we kind of do, right? So,
the two things I want to say to that. The first one, just a slight correction because I am overly pedantic about this. Inflation is antecedent to the Big Bang. The Big Bang is not the beginning of the universe. Inflation comes before it. Not that big of a deal. But for me, when we talk about, why is
the recombination period? Reionization period.
Actually, recombination, reionization are they're just interesting to me. Just the way that we can measure that those things happened in reality with the cosmic microwave background. But
that's how the recombination period happened, right? Because
exactly
what happened when people again, they have a hard time conceptualizing these things, and it's not easy. These are not easy things to conceptualize.
It's really not. It's non-intuitive, very non-intuitive.
Can you imagine this very hot, opaque universe that existed where light itself could not escape? Okay, there was no decoupling yet. There was no electrons or there's just a sea of photon of energy. And all of a sudden, when it reached below a certain temperature, you had atoms start forming. You at least even, well, I should say, you started having leptons forming. You had electrons and forming, and then all of a sudden you would have some, protons forming and stuff like that. But you had this light that couldn't go anywhere. It was just trapped in this very hot, dense state, and all of a sudden went out everywhere. And that's what we see from the cosmic microwave background radiation. We see the remnants of that. And what's amazing is that the initial quantum fluctuations that existed primordially, those are imprinted in the cosmic microwave background radiation. They're just taken like so small and blown up to where we can actually see, hey, that's a quantum fluctuation.
Temperature perturbations, I believe. They exist. Yeah. Temperature anisotropies.
Temperature anisotropies. Yeah.
Perturbations. What was I going to say? I was going to say something that related to what you just said. Wow. Sometimes my mind really doesn't want to work.
Take your time. We're just rambling. I'm really caffeinated right now, so whatever.
Oh, Jesus, man! It was a really cool point, and I lost it. I hate when this happens.
Well, let me ask you this: what do you think about, like, for example, the Big Bang? Somebody had asked this question the other day. A friend of mine, I don't know if you know her. Her name is Kirsten. We've had her on the Non Sequitur show before. Astro Kirsten.
Yeah. Yep.
Very, very brilliant.
Oh gosh, she's so fucking brilliant.
Astronomer. I adore her. She's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's Kirsten Banks, I think.
Kirsten
is her
Banks,
actual name.
Yeah. And so she had somebody ask her a question, like, what does it mean by, that even asked the question, what is before time? Now, I didn't mention to them, but I actually had a nice talk with Dr. Lawrence Krauss on the no boundary proposal that Hartling and Hawking
Hawking model.
They had come up with to try to get it down to t equals 0 using imaginary time, and I love that discussion. I thought it was amazing. But it is nonsensical to say what happened before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang created time, at least as far as this universe. Now, this is when it gets to the multiverse thing, and I'm going to have Dr. Jeff Schwerink hopefully on again to talk about these things. I just talked to C about that today. That there could be some kind of multiverse time, and of course, what would the theists call that? They would call it God time.
Yeah, some sort of non-standard time that we are not used to in any way, shape, or form. Because time is, I think a lot of people gloss over the fact that time is a dimension, and the way that we experience it is literally just a sort of an illusion of our consciousness. That isn't how time actually plays out in reality. So it is entirely possible that there could be time before time, in quotes, in the sense that there's time before there's a structure to time before the way that we understand it. We just really don't know yet. But a good analogy, and I know that you've heard this, Steve, because I'm pretty sure you've used it, and I'm sure most in your audience have heard it. But for those that haven't, a good explanation for why it's just, in my opinion, the way I would word it is just completely incoherent to talk about time before time is like asking the question, what's north of the North Pole? The concept of north references the North Pole. So once you get to that point of reference, to ask about something that would require that point just doesn't.
And we had brought that up on the show today. I mean, that somebody had actually mentioned the exact same thing, because I think it was Hawking that did use that analogy. But we also know there is something above the North Pole, right? But even though it's not north, there's something beyond that. Now, there are cyclic versions of the universe, or things that say those universes before ours. There might have been a universe before ours where the arrow of time went backwards. It started from a very high entropic state and went to low entropy, whether than us going from low entropy to high entropy. Who knows, right? But again, that would be something that has a very different understanding of what space-time is. Now, there's two different ways of really looking at space-time from what I understand. There's the Minkowski approach, where you have a four-dimensional space-time manifold, and then you have the Neo-Lorentzian, which is 3 dimensions of spatial, 1 dimension time, which, by the way, we didn't get into in the Agree to Argue segment, because just we had a lot of time constraints. But it is very important to note that in the fine-tuning argument, it is something to note that we have 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal, which works out perfectly for us. If we had any other type of scenario where we had 2D and 1T or 4D, and none of it would work out very well. Now, some of them are viable. Some of them could exist, but it wouldn't be hospitable to life. Yeah. At least as far as we understand life to be, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Did Ivan? Oh God, Sean Carroll did a video. Obviously, physicist Sean Carroll did a video. He's got the biggest ideas in the universe series. It's like 23 or 24 videos. He did one. I can't remember what it's called. I think it might have been the one on space or the one on, because he did one on space. He did one on time, and then he did one on space-time. And it was either the one on space or the one on space-time, where he talked about that when we see the amount of dimensions that we have, if we go less or more, we run into not just conceptual problems, but even some physical problems with how things are structured in reality. But another thing that I wanted to mention, just because I think it is a point that really needs to be stressed, is you talked about, the origins of the universe and entropy. For anybody out there that wants to use the low entropy state of the early universe as evidence of a beginning that doesn't work, there's absolutely nothing currently in physics that tells us why, more in terms of how than why, the universe is low entropy in the past time direction. We don't know. That doesn't mean that that's a big... I like to quote Sean Carroll on this, again, the physicist, because this is a very succinct and direct quote, and I think that it really makes the point, and that is, the Big Bang is not the beginning of the universe. It's the end of our theoretical understanding of it.
Yeah, because we have no conceptualization what it'd be like of anything other than prior than that. I mean, if it even makes sense to even ask the question prior to.
That actually brings up the point that I wanted to mention earlier. When we were talking about some of the stuff in science being non-intuitive, especially in at least certain concepts in relativity and some other ones in quantum mechanics. This is my argument, so people are free to disagree, but my argument for why these concepts, despite the mathematics not necessarily being more difficult or rigorous than classical mechanics or what have you, conceptually, relativity and especially quantum mechanics can be very, very hard to understand from a purely conceptual standpoint. The reason that I think that is because when we talk about things in classical mechanics, we've got the math and we know the math works. It gives us accurate results. We can make verifiable predictions with it. But at the same time, we can directly experience the things that the math is telling us, so to speak. We can experience that. We can experience a ball rolling down a hill, a car driving down the road, a tank full of water emptying and the level of the water dropping and thus the pressure put on the water. We can use calculus to calculate all these various rates of change. We can experience this. You go into relativity or quantum mechanics, humans do not have a direct experiential, or rather phenomenological experience of reality at those levels. So we're not able to intuit into the math what we otherwise would with something like classical mechanics, where we know what the math is telling us because we've experienced those things. With quantum mechanics, we haven't directly experienced something like superposition. What the fuck does that even mean? It's mind-blowing because we've never experienced it. These subjects are so hard to conceptually understand, or so non-intuitive, because we don't know how to intuit them. The math works. We get good results from the math. We know how to use it. But we don't know what conceptually that means. We don't know how to picture it in our minds.
I think it's more fundamental than that. Okay, because we both agree that most of these things will describe what we observe, whether it be the Copenhagen interpretation or the multi-world hypothesis or pilot wave theory. All of them seem to work, right?
Yeah, you can reproduce the universe that we see regardless of the model, for the most part.
Which one of you go with, it's going to work. But what I find amazing is in a quantum mechanical system, what we don't see in a macro system, is that when we're observing something, we become part of that system. And so we could become entangled to the point where that entire wave function is describing that entire system. And that is something that is, again, going to the fine-tuning argument that how are we as some kind of agent why do we become part of that system? It really shouldn't be like that. Observations shouldn't have that degree. And I'm not trying to say, look, we observe something and the universe responds to it. It is math, the fact that we're observing it, that quantum mechanics does seem to, at least, behave differently under observational conditions. I'm not talking about instrumental things. I'm not talking about an instrument having an effect on the system. I am saying the actual measurement, right? The measurement problem, the actual observation of that system where we're observing it and we become entangled in that system to the point where we're part of that wave function. I mean, let's say like Schrodinger's cat, and if I open that box and I'm in the quantum system, one universe exists where I see a cat that's dead. One universe exists where I see the cat that's alive. I am part of that system. Those universes have now split off in the many worlds hypothesis.
I didn't know you were an Everettian now, Steve.
I'm not, I still hold a Copenhagen. Don't get your hopes up. But that doesn't mean that multi-world hypothesis doesn't have viability, because again, the math works for it, right? But again, in that particular case, you have created. I mean, think about this. You have created an entire universe because of a single event that you did. That's what it implies ontologically. That's a pretty significant metaphysical statement to be made, that an entire universe has been created merely because of a quantum mechanical effect because you observe something.
I would agree with that in principle. What I would say is that with the Everettian model, I wouldn't argue that there's other universes out there. There's still, I mean, well, there could be in any model. It just, but let's just assume that there isn't a multiverse, just for the sake of this.
And I'm not talking about multiverse. I'm talking about a multi-world hypothesis. That's not even the same thing.
And because a lot of people, when I mentioned, because I actually stopped adhering to the Copenhagen interpretation. I just don't really have a preferred interpretation. If it works, I'll use it. That's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I just prefer the Copenhagen because I just think it does collapse in it. Because I mean, if you have the wave function and you get a collapsing of it, it will give you a specific position or momentum, right? It'll give you some information that it will only exist. It only comes into being after it's been measured. Period.
But the one thing I wanted, because when I talk about the Everettian or the many worlds hypothesis, the many worlds I prefer to call them foundations versus interpretations. If you want to know why I read John Carroll's book, Something Deeply Hidden, a lot of people will misconstrue it as that there's actually like physically separate universes that everything happens in. That's not what the Everettian model says. It says that there's this universe, and again, granting for the sake of this discussion that a multiverse actually is not a thing. There's this universe, but there are different timelines along which events within it can evolve.
Yeah, and I get that, but
different timelines will give you different
there's still different timelines in this universe. It's still exceptionally very insignificant from saying, well, there's a whole new universe being created, because you're creating a whole new timeline. Got a super chat.
Yes.
We got a super chat. That's for a Unleashed. That's awesome. Kawasa 10,001. He says, I think I sort of get why people who accept the reality of physical world and want to reconcile it with religion eventually end up with deism. The thing with deism is that there's a non-impersonal God, right? There's a type of being that said, hey, look. Again, not specifically this, but look, I'm going to create a universe, not going to interact with any of the inhabitants, not going to interact with anything produced. Maybe he created the universe because thought it was pretty. Maybe he created a universe where he wanted life to come about, but had no idea what the life would be. But a lot of these things at most argue a lot for deism. And I do, under non-classical interpretations and non-classical schema, put deism under theism. However, if somebody puts it separately, I'm okay with that too. I can work within the classical schema as well. But most of these arguments, at most, they're going to get you to some kind of intentional being, some intentional agent that's going to fall more into deism than it would theism. A lot of them make this weird leap to the Christianity. And I've really never seen a good argument for any kind of science based argument from a Christian to Christianity. I know, Ross and I know Fuzzrana make that leap, but I've never seen them make a really good argument from that. The most I can see that I've seen from like Hugh is that he did write a book called Informal Planet. From what I understand, I have read it, and from what I understand, the physics and science is pretty good on it. I don't agree with this conclusion, but it's a well-written, popular book. It's a well-written book for people that want to at least understand his argument. But I don't think he ever really argues it has to be the Christian God in any real degree, because what is it about a Christian God where you have this human that came down, born of a virgin, that had to sacrifice himself for sin? How does any of these scientific arguments get you to that? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I feel like the arguments that are given for specifically Christianity almost always, not necessarily exclusively, but in my experience, almost always boil down to, well, when we look at, the resurrection of Jesus and all that stuff, Christianity seems to be the most viable religion. It's sort of adopting this idea that could then be utilized in any religion, but then giving a reason for why Christianity is likely the most true, and I put that in quotes because those words are a little iffy, but the most true religion that you could apply it to. And I think that that's the reason, or rather that's the argument that most people give for Christianity, is the whole, well, the resurrection in Jesus in the New Testament and historical accuracy and everything along those lines, rather than arguing directly from the science.
See, I think it's more just popularity. I think Christianity just happens to be one of the more popular views. And that's why they kind of argue for it, because I just don't see any reasonable way to make a leap from even the Kalam cosmological argument, or even a tag argument, like I talked about, a conceptual thing existing at all times, all places, to hold these laws of logic or physical laws, where it has to be some kind of Christian deity. It just has to be, in that case, a mind, a disembodied mind that exists forever, and in some kind of eternity. By the way, I did give a link to other people, so if you're in the if you're out there and you want in, I did give you the link. Go check your DMs and stuff like that.
Oh shit! What was I saying? Yeah, I think actually I can agree with that. A lot of it does have to do with the popularity of Christianity. I guess that this whole, Jesus rose from the dead and New Testament historical accuracy is, in some senses, I do see it as almost a sort of a post hoc justification for their selection of Christianity, rather than reasoning to Christianity from that argument, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, to some degree. Jim had asked, and by the way, Jim, get in here. He said,
Jimmy.
He said, I missed the chat with Davies. Does he still believe that atheists don't want a God exist? He didn't get into that, but, there's something to be said about the axiology of theism, right? And,
yes,
so
so.
You have anti-theism, which is going to be the opposite of pro-theism, which the anti-theist will say, look, even if God exists, it lowers the overall value to society. It still has a more negative effect if God exists, and it doesn't. That's an axiological approach. As a matter of fact, anti-theism is one of the reasons why it's against the concept of God and or religion. And no, if you go watch what, like Randolph Richardson, is that his name? Whatever that guy is. Yeah. I mean, his view of what anti-theism is so bizarre, so out there. It's just to be nonsensical. Anti-theism is not the belief that God does not exist. Theists could be anti-theist.
I like Randolph Richardson as a person, just really quickly, but I've told him before.
I think he's a horrible
human being. That's just not the way
to
construe anti. I'm sorry, that's just straightforwardly that's not what anti-theism is.
He instead of just showing that I was incorrect about my explanation about his blog, and everything he wrote on there was just hot garbage. He attacked me personally, and I was like, forget it, you're done. There's no coming back from that. So yeah, I don't like people that attack me personally. I think they're shitty people.
I agree. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, his understanding is just absolutely bizarre.
Do you want to know? I actually would like to run this by you, Steven. I want your opinion on this.
I don't have
opinions. The reason
I just make stuff
that
up.
I think the reason that I think there's such a divide between what I'm going to call philosophical atheist, which would be myself. I believe that God does not exist. I believe that is a philosophical position, and I believe that it is one that requires some level of sufficient warrant for it.
Yeah, no,
that's what I would call a philosophical atheist in this instance. A new atheist is somebody who, and I'm going to define the terms and then explain what I mean, is that a new atheist, at least to me, based on my experiences, is somebody more that's views atheism as a psychological disposition rather than a philosophical position.
Right.
And I think that's the stark divide between the philosophical atheists and the new atheists is how they view their atheism. It's two opposite ends. Not opposite ends, but two different points on a spectrum. And I think that's why there's so much, I don't think dissonance would be the right word, but maybe it is, between philosophical and new atheists.
The reason is this, and we'll get Jim in here, and Cheshire guys the link too. Okay, so the thing is this. For the longest time, theism dealt with the question of God's existence, right? It was somebody who actually believes that there's a God. So that is a ontological question. That is a metaphysical question about existence, right? What new atheists, trademark especially, have done is they try to change that from a propositional state to a psychological state, which unfortunately now means that atheism, if that's what they want to do, means that atheism is now conditional upon your personal psychological state, not having anything to do whether God exists or not, which to me, it just seems nonsensical. And at the same time, they'll argue things like, well, atheism is based upon reason and evidence and logic, but then, babies are atheists. It's like, well, how you can't have it both ways. And I put that argument in, some Facebook groups, and it's amazing how many people don't understand that very simple concept. You can't have it both ways. So yes, you're right. I think that describing things as a psychological condition makes absolutely no sense, because what you're doing is you're taking a subalteration and you're making that the label, the normative label for it. And I do have a new argument that I'm working on. I kind of ran it through by Ozzy a little bit, and I've just put a teaser out on Twitter, which I call semantics collapse. And by defining something in this subalteration, you have a potential for a person to have a semantic collapse where you have the term atheist, theist, and agnostic all mean the same thing, and a person is all three. And it logically follows.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and I have a whole Google page of. I've got notes on this stuff of the actual forms for the square of opposition and some detailed stuff. But very simply, that's what happens. And I don't see any way out of it logically. And I want to challenge atheists to come at me and say, okay, show me why this logical argument's flawed. Because all they have done is say, oh, well, Steve's wrong. But none of them have ever said, hey, Steve, I want to talk to you and show you why your logic is wrong. None of them. But anyways, hi, Jim. Hi, Chesh.
Hi.
You guys came in together. What does that imply? Okay, well, actually, Jim came first. Then Cheshire says he usually does. Dun dun dun.
Well, that's none of your damn business, Steve.
I know details, man. Supposedly, Cheshire and I we eloped and we didn't know about it. We're not going to confirm.
Where'd you guys supposedly elope to when you didn't know about it?
Yeah, supposedly. I don't know.
Quarantine. So hey, first of all, Jim, what's wrong with your mic? You sound like you're in a shed.
Oh, hang on. I might have the wrong mic turned on.
And you didn't watch the discussion that I had? Because I got to admit, it was fun. Now, I did expect
it was a very good one.
I didn't expect to get a lot in, because you got three people that are epically more qualified than I am to pontificate.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the better ones. I thought that was one of the better ones. Yes, much better.
No, I missed it. How did it go?
Very well. Very well. It was this is why I like the channel Agree to Argue. It's not that any discussions on the channel have been bad, but this is definitely out of like maybe two or three, one of the ones I would consider, with those other two or three that are just one of really top-notch discussions. And like I said, that's one of the things I really like about this channel is these are actual intellectual discussions, philosophical discussions on these, quite frankly, rather nuanced and complex topics or subjects in the philosophy of the atheism versus theism debate. And I think that a lot of and I'm going to word it this way, bullshit that you get when you typically deal with atheists and even some theists on the internet is sort of that's not present in these discussions because of the type of people that are
level discussion,
on the channel. Yeah.
By the way, and that is the great debate community. That was non sequitur show. Caffeine Corner.
Very true.
The things I like to do, I like to have elevated discussions, and yet I'll still go into Facebook groups where people will be like, Steve doesn't know what he's talking about. He has shit discussions. He can't moderate. He blah blah blah. And then you ask him, well, what shows did you not like or whatever? I don't watch his stuff. How the hell do you know then?
Well, because it says so on Twitter.
That's what it is. Oh,
well, I mean, Matt Dillahunty told me, Steve, come on now.
But Matt Dillahunty won't touch my arguments. Arn Rom won't touch my arguments. And by the way, Nikki Davis is out there. Mwah. Give her love. Give her love. Love her right now.
I did want to say that Facebook groups are.
They're toxic.
I'm gonna be honest.
Twitter now.
There's people that I agree with wholeheartedly in terms of the ideologies that they adhere to, but then I see how they're defending it and the points that they're making, and I'm just like, oh, bro, please let me handle this. Like, I'm sorry, I agree with you. I think you're right, but you are doing a shitty job
I'll give you a perfect example.
of defending it.
Cheshire. That that godless Liz that we dealt with on Twitter was a perfect typification of an archetype of a dumb atheist. I mean, there's just no way of describing her otherwise. She's just straight up stupid. And everyone was trying to explain to her certain things. She got the, she found the most generic descriptions of things to say that we were wrong. I even said to her, look, you don't even know how definitions work. And she's like, well, here's the definition. I'm like, oh God, just kill me.
It was bad.
Am I exaggerating, Josh? But this is the type of atheist that people are looking up to. I mean, they foster, hey, let's get the dumbest people we can find, and we'll use them to support our channels and support our Twitter, and use them to dogpile people going, you're just stupid. It's like, why don't you have an actual refutation? Did you notice like that one, what's the guy, natural pantheism or whatever? I showed him, by the way, what you showed him as well. I not just Stanford, but I also brought up other things and other examples, all of which had a consilience to what an ad hom argument was. For those in the back, an ad hom argument is a type of fallacious argument.
She was if I were to draw a caricature of New Atheism TM and like made a bingo card, I would just use her thread. I would use her Twitter as the template.
It was bad.
It was
one of
like
the worst ones.
If I were to write up a TV trope and make a New Atheist TM TV trope entry on that website, I would link to her Twitter page.
Did you not see, though, people white knighting for her? Did you not see? Somebody even jumped in and said, well, she's not making any claims. I said, well, here are 3 claims. And I even asked Tim O'Neill, which, this whole start of this whole thing, who has been very kind to me and kind to Cheshire, and I happen to like the guy. And he's been on,
I had an interviewee type thing with him on my channel.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's interviewed him. He's been on a Non Sequitur show.
It's a lot of fun. He was super, he was great.
But he said, yeah, these are claims. How are these not claims? And somebody's like, well, she didn't claim. And he's like, the hell, she didn't. What the hell are you talking about?
I mean, we see that a lot. One of the guys we were talking about, I still have to go through over it on my channel. I've been going and visiting my family and doing stuff, so I haven't really gotten much time to do anything on my channel recently. But I have one set up with this one guy we were talking to, and I think Leo was in there, and he came in sideways because he was defending somebody else, and he claimed that all Christians were crazy, and then said he didn't make any claims because we were talking about burden of proof. And it's like, but nobody in this conversation was talking about whether or not God existed, and we were talking about whether or not people have the burden of proof. And then they were like, well, would I be justified? And it's just like, I don't know. Are you? You tell me.
If you
That's
say all
the point.
theists are crazy, that is a claim. And
Yes,
my counter to that is,
it's truth apt.
Well, my counter to that is, look, if you call theists crazy, you're saying that theists have a malfunctioning of the mind. And just having a false belief is not constitutive of a malfunction in the mind. It could lead to that. Don't get me wrong. There are,
in that context, in that context, you could say like, oh, I think Christians are crazy in more of like in more of a. I'm talking about the social group, not the individual type of thing, which wouldn't necessarily connotate a mental state, like or some kind of cognitive dysfunction. You could just say like, oh, they're out there protesting, and I think that's crazy. They're protesting gays being married or something, and I think they're crazy to do that. That's not really taught. That's a different kind of context for using the word crazy, but in the context that we're talking about, talking about, you would have that implication.
I'd be okay with that. But Quasa says the Wendy Wright of atheism. Did you guys ever watch the Witch of Dawkins, where him and Wendy Wright were at the museum?
I don't think so.
Watch it. Just look up Wendy Wright and Dawkins. He brought things down to like a baby level to try to explain to her stuff, and it just was not happening. Not happening.
I did want to comment really quickly on the God list.
Her smile and nod and his disbelief of like,
it's just like, oh my
how
God.
is she not understanding this?
She didn't. She was oblivious to anything that he was saying. And what
just
he was
really
saying
quick,
was simple.
Is Wendy Wright? Okay, I know that name. But that wasn't a televangelist, was it, or was it?
She's a Christian evangelist spokesperson kind of thing. It's like some kind of coalition or something.
I was trying to figure out where, because I know the name and I can see the face.
As soon as you saw a picture of her, yeah, she's.
Yeah, I've seen her face. Where did I see her at?
Some Christian coalition that she leads.
Well, she was a conservative political strategist.
That could be it. But I did want to comment on the godless Liz. I don't really. I mean, I've heard of her. I don't know anything about her, so I'm not going to make any statements about that. But the thing is, I don't know the merit of this website, so I'm not going to say it's necessarily inaccurate. But she cited from logicallyfallacious.com. My assumption is that's probably not an academic source. That doesn't mean it's wrong.
For genetics, or, you know, it.
When I had read quite a bit of the exchange.
Oh wait, never mind. That's the wrong one.
And then I had commented, and I cited from sites I know are academic because obviously the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is academic. But then I cited from a Lander University, I think it is, their Department of Philosophy.
Well. Yeah, I have that.
And they both showed that the way she construed the definition of an argumentum ad hominem is not correct. That is not how it's construed generally.
Yeah.
Or in a way that actually makes sense.
Yeah, because the way the ad hominem argument is a fallacious argument because it has a premise and usually a hidden premise and then a conclusion. And the premise is something along the lines of, you know, you're smoking. Conclusion: smoking is not bad for you. And there's a hidden premise in there that if you're smoking, then smoking can't be bad. It's a fallacious argument, obviously, right? But it is a type of argument, and that's why it's called an ad hominem argument. It's not just saying that you're, you know, an insult. And so, like rational pantheism was saying, oh, well, if somebody gives you an argument and you just say you're stupid, that's ad hominem. No, it's not when we're talking about a fallacious use. Now, again, ad hominem does mean to the man, and there's some legal terms that uses ad hominem, right? But we're talking about in a fallacious usage. That means that what you have said is your argument that somebody's promoting is discarded because of some personal trait characteristic about the person. And if you look at tu quoque, if you look at abuse, what's called abuse and circumstantial and guilt by association, all of them are types of ad hominem, and all of them have the same logical fallacy structure.
Yep, appeal to authority the same way.
Yeah.
I just took a look at her Twitter. And is anybody surprised that Wendy Wright is a Trump?
Oh no, I know she's a Trump. Yeah,
fake election.
A Trumpist.
Lady.
Oh no, she's hardcore conservative.
Aren't most evangelist Trumpians?
Oh, I always forget that Dinesh D'Souza is a person that exists, and then every so often he pops up on somebody else's something, and I'm like, oh god, this fucking guy.
Is he still alive? I know that Zachariah died,
90%.
but is D'Souza alive too?
Dinesh.
Yeah.
Dinesh D'Souza.
I know
he's still around. You know, he's still around, still being kind of the worst sort of person on the planet.
You know who I was talking to today on Twitter, though? I haven't talked to in a long time. Jonathan Sarfati. You recognize that name?
No.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Dr. Jonathan Sarfati. I go way back with him. We used to communicate a lot on YouTube videos, and we would have some pretty good deep, in-depth discussions. But he's got a PhD in biochemistry, and he's a young Earth creationist.
What's his last name?
Sarfati.
I think it's Sarfati, I believe.
He actually is a legit genius. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from him. He's well known for being able to play like 12 to 20 games of chess at one time. He's a legit chess master. He is a very, very smart dude. Very, very aggressive, though. I mean, he is one of those people that, you know, will go after you for insulting, you know, like young Earth creationism. But I've always got along with him, so we've always managed. And he and Hugh Ross go way back and stuff like that. But he actually retweeted a lot of things that I was posting about when it came to some of my atheist arguments. And I was kind of like, hey, that's kind of cool, man. He didn't even read some of them. He just reposted them. But I was like, oh, that's still cool, you know.
Helio says about the lady on Twitter with the ad hom stuff. I love how all of her cited definitions actually contradicted what she was saying, since they included the fact that they had to be irrelevant to the topic.
Yeah, she didn't understand what she was reading, and that's what people were pointing out to her. It's like she didn't have the skill set to go, okay, maybe there's more to it than what I'm reading here, because when you go to some of these sources, a lot of them just give a very generic understanding. Matter of fact, one of the things she cited, I actually found. And she said, well, this was the University of Michigan's or something's definition of ad hominem. And I'm like, wait, I found it. It was not the University of Michigan's definition. What it was a book on communication where the author itself asked to have his name removed from the publication. And if you read it, you can probably see why. It was very bad. But it was just a book that was in the library of the of the university. And I'm like, all it was somebody talking about communication that kind of give a little blurb about it. That's not how you learn something. You go to a technical book that is about that topic. If I want to learn about fallacies, I'll go to a book on fallacious thinking, right? She doesn't understand how any of that works. She thinks that you can read a dictionary and go, look, I understand, how words are. No, you don't.
Can I read something really quick?
Yeah.
This is from Lander University. Quote, often the fallacy, and this is talking about the ad hominem fallacy, quote, often the fallacy is characterized simply as a personal attack. However, a personal attack is a claim, not a fallacy.
Correct.
Thus, a character or a circumstantial attack simpliciter is not evaluated as an ad hominem argument or an ad hominem fallacy.
That's what I told her.
And that is from their Department of Philosophy.
That's why I said if you give me an argument,
philosophy is not a real department.
but do you debate?
Philosophically,
if you give me an argument, I just say you're stupid. I'm making a claim that you're stupid. I'm not making. That's the difference. It's not an argument. An argument would be you're wrong because you're stupid. That's an argument. It's fallacious. That's what an ad hominem fallacy is. It's an ad hominem argument because it's fallacious.
Yep.
If I define a debate as the conversations I have with myself in the shower, then I have.
I did want to say
who wins in those debates.
Personal, just a bare personal attack that's not just a straight personal insult is still wrong to do in a debate. It's just not an argumentum ad hominem.
It's bad form.
Rational Ricky has a good point that at most it could be called what's called poisoning the well. And I think for a formal structured debate, that's something to be said. Now, informally, no, I don't think it's poisoning the well because people have conversations. It's just kind of discussionary kind of stuff. And we'll say it all the time. Look, you're a flat earther. You're just stupid. It's fine. I got no issue with that.
You're stupid because you think the Earth is flat. Yeah. But there's a
if it's a ranked debate, then that might be a different story.
Yeah, well, there's also a difference between we have to separate out what fallacies are really applicable in conversation and what fallacies are applicable in a formal debate, or what fallacies are applicable in a discussion that's actually supposed to be that more kind of a back and forth. I saw somebody accuse somebody else of a non sequitur when they asked a question that was related to the topic, but not it was, I've noticed that too. So I have this question about this. And so the question was tertiarily related, but it wasn't about the topic. It wasn't any kind of throwback to oh, well, what about this sort of thing? And the person accused them of a non sequitur. And it's but they didn't come to a conclusion based on anything or present anything. They're just asking. It's just a question, assholes. Come on. It's not. Relax a little bit.
I generally find that when somebody either A, refuses to answer a genuine question, or B, refuses to contend with a hypothetical that's been presented, that this is indicative of the fact that they recognize that either the question or the hypothetical doesn't necessarily work in their favor, and they are skeptical to contend with that for that reason.
Or they just don't understand.
I also find that or people will think that a question is
they're just dumb.
And that's just an extreme lack of integrity.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, In some cases, sometimes you've just caught somebody on a bad day.
A lack of integrity.
Once in a while, you just catch somebody on a bad day.
Honestly, it doesn't just show a lack of integrity in the argument, but a lack of integrity in the person.
Yeah, I agree with that. True. But look, when my arguments, okay, this is late on the line here. If I say something scientifically incorrect, in a hot minute, I'm going to have people up on my ass. It's going to happen.
Did you say ad hoc minute?
Right? No, up in a minute, right? Just boom. Somebody's going to say, "Hey, Steve, your understanding of physics is screwed up. You're an idiot." I have people that understand these topics, and they will correct me on. If I say, I don't know, there's something wrong. But in my philosophical arguments, I never get anybody to really challenge them beyond, "Oh, Steve, here's a dictionary. You're wrong." That's the extent that I get. Nobody has the logic.
Yeah.
Nobody.
There's also something to be said about whether or not you're going to deal with somebody who's asking a question that you've answered a million times. So maybe sometimes check to make sure that they haven't already answered your question a million times. But there's also something to be said if you compare blogs, right? So if somebody is writing a blog about atheism and they're trying to justify that terminology, And then you've got somebody like Answers and Reason or Steve writing a blog about how, no, not that way, this way. And one has logical proofs in it, and the other one has links to definitions that say the exact opposite of what they're saying. I feel like maybe
I would just think one of them would be able to go, okay, here's the here's the logic. Let's look at it and show that it'd be incorrect. Because again, I don't see like the one I'm working on now, the semantic collapse argument. I don't see a way out of it. I mean, I've had for hours pored over this, looking at different ways of looking at this from a square of opposition approach. I can't see one. Matter of fact, again, I know I'm on solid ground because Dr. Oppie pointed out the same thing. He didn't call it semantic collapse. That's my terminology. He didn't give an argument for it really. He just basically explained, look, this is what happens, and it was like 2 lines. I have a whole document on why it occurs. And I would love to have an atheist, and you guys could go find me one. Go ask in a group. Find me an atheist that's willing to say, okay, here's why this logic doesn't follow. And I would love to hear something like that. I would put them on air in a heartbeat. People have said, well, hey, such and such has already refuted you. No, because if they did, they would have it typed out in a very rational, very logical way. But every single person that I've ran into, especially on Facebook, not one of them has ever addressed the logic. They don't.
It's a misunderstanding.
They don't do it.
It's a straight up initial misunderstanding about the conversation that they're even a part of. They either think this is a semantic argument, or they think they're talking to somebody who's trying to trick them, which is why they call a bunch of us we're actually Christians or whatever, because what your position is matters to whether
we're
or
all
not
theists in here. We just don't know it according to atheists.
Apparently, according to both presuppositionalists and atheists.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim O'Neill. I'm sure, Jim, you could probably get called theist every so often.
Oh yeah, I get called a theist, an atheist, traitor.
Hey, we're all part of the same club.
Isn't that bizarre, though? I mean, this is how you know you're not dealing with people that are that rational or that want to have conversations. When they're telling us that we are theists, it's like, are you out of your mind?
I honestly think the level of conversation is worse than talking to flat earthers. At least flat earthers understand most of the time that you're talking about geometry, even if they don't understand the geometry. At least most of them understand that they're talking about physics, even if they don't understand the physics, or gravity, even if they don't understand the gravity. We've got people who are talking about logic and reasoning and understanding and saying it's not philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about knowledge, not philosophy. Oh, we're talking about religion, not philosophy. Or we're talking about logic, not philosophy.
Yeah, they don't even know what the subject is.
They don't know what the subject is.
By the way, really quickly, Chesh, were you describing the debate, the 3 versus 3 that I recently had with Dapper Dino and Paul Kamish against 3 flat earthers? Because they did not understand geometry, they did not understand physics, and they certainly didn't understand. Let me just put it to you this way: one of the persons, it's a male that goes by Bev. I think it was like an acronym for something, but. Was trying to argue that there's no instance under which the angles of a triangle can add up to more than 180 degrees. And I just asked, I was like, have you ever heard of like Riemannian geometry?
Yeah, spherical geometry.
Yeah. Oh no.
And me and Dapper tried to explain this for 20 fucking minutes.
Oh God.
So this is what I mean. At least they understand they're talking about shapes, though.
Yeah,
true.
That's what I mean. Like we've got people who don't understand what topic they're even talking about. At least the flat earthers understand that they're talking about the shape of the earth.
Yeah. But I did want to say I found more again in my experiences that atheists seem to suffer from groupthink more than theists do.
A lot.
Oh, God.
I have found that to be the case. I really have. I've seen theists disagree on a whole slew of topics and have decent discussions about it. 2 atheists disagree on something and they're both blocking each other.
It's
10 minutes into the yes.
Yeah. No,
it's because they don't have any commonality. Well, there's not the same structure as theism has. There's like within theism, at least you have a belief structure that tells you what your belief is. In atheism, the only thing that you have is God. A God or gods does not exist. That's all you have.
So the way I would put it is you've got like the new atheism plus TM is essentially the Catholic Church. and they don't want anybody else to have atheism in any other way except the way that they dictate everything to be.
Atheism,
so right, exactly. So eventually there's going to be some kind of Protestant split off.
But I love when they say, hey, look, hey, Steve's telling us how to atheism properly, or hey, Steve's telling us what we believe. I'm like, none of that even follows from anything I've ever argued in any way, shape, or form. But I do notice they got to degrade people that do have differing viewpoints as trolls, like Godless Liz.
Yes.
Anybody who doesn't agree with her is a troll, is a psychopath. It's like, I think
you're a troll. You're a Poe.
Terms, hey, absolutely not a Poe either. I can at least understand people thinking that I'm a troll, even though I'm definitely not. I mean, it is interesting to watch people's reactions. I mean, I'm not saying that.
Hey, you know what that is,
I don't want
Steve?
to trigger people. My arguments do trigger people, right? But it's not something that is intentional. It's just something that is a result of them.
I refuse to go and deal with any of this on Facebook.
Oh, God,
I refuse.
I can do it on Twitter, but not Facebook.
Right, I can't.
You got so much more you got to deal with. People write that much bullshit.
Yep.
Well, I don't really mind the writing more bullshit. It's Twitter could use like a little more characters, and
500.
Facebook could use a little less. Yeah, 500 would be good. I hate the thread. I hate the layout on Facebook. It's such trash.
I can't find shit on Facebook, by the way, anymore. I know I missed messages.
No,
I found one today. Somebody said, well, it looks like Steve abandoned his argument and quit. It was like 16 hours. It wasn't even like, a full 24 hours. I went 3 days the other day without being on Facebook because I got a timeout. I'm not on Facebook every day. But it was 16 hours, as somebody already said. Look at Steve. He already realized he's wrong, and he abandoned his argument. I'm like,
I know what that was. That was on that guy that said epistemology is just a bunch of woo. And I'm just like, wait, what?
Epistemology's woo. Epistemology's woo.
Your epistemology's woo.
I'm not even bullshitting. This is the argument. Epistemology is woo.
And I asked him, I was like, can you, what is the definition of epistemology? He said, it's just a bunch of woo, magical thinking. I'm just like, oh God, no, please. We're not going to go down this road. I was like,
guys, philosophy is magic. Philosophy is magic. Time is space. What is it? Time is meaningless and space is bendable.
Space and time actually are philosophical concepts, believe it or not.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Kawasa for 5
Epistemology's brainwashing.
Kawasa did a super chat.
I don't want to know what metaphysics is then.
Well.
Do you want me to get it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Kawasa for 5 says, Steve was listed as the atheist YouTubers to follow list according to someone's Twitter post, so...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so much anymore because I'm not as active on this channel that I once was. Although I'm trying to be. I'm trying to put out more content. I've got a lot of people that I want to talk to. It's just again, I'm saving them, but I might have to do something because it's been rough. It's been. But I looked at other channels as well. It looks like views are down all over. It's not just me, so I'm not taking anything personally.
Somebody posted a picture of some art students from Berlin in 1927. And I'm looking at them, and they think they look like Green Day.
I like Green Day. But like Helios points out, one of our favorite things to do is correct Steve. Yeah, and I don't sit there and go, I've been corrected. You must die now. You've chosen death. I go. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I changed my position. It's not complicated. I don't know why people are so afraid of being wrong. We all get wrong. The people I trust the most are the ones that are willing to change their position and correct it. And by the way, that we all do these things. We all get corrected because no way could we right on everything. Those are the people that I trust the most because if they continue to put out stuff, it's going to probably be more likely the case because somebody would have corrected them by now.
Yeah, excuse me.
Well, so here's the thing. You have this thing that you could be wrong about, or you have this people are asking you to make a decision about something, and they're not giving you the information. They're not giving you what would be a behavior, or approaching you with a behavior that you want to acknowledge, because if you acknowledge piss poor behavior, you're going to get everybody being fucking piss poor assholes. Or they're playing hide the ball, or they're
That's my favorite.
Right, or they're not even right initially, right? So if Steve's WASP argument, let's say for example, is ever proven, if somebody ever comes forward with something that's actually conducive to showing that Steve was wrong, that does not mean that everybody who said he was wrong was suddenly right in what they were saying.
Yeah, and by the way,
If
I have recently edited.
show it,
I have recently edited my WASP argument a little bit. There was nothing wrong with it logically. It just had, some grammatical things I didn't like the way it was worded. But nobody's ever pointed them out to me. They could have. I mean, they were minor, and
right.
But I mean, I fixed them.
Right.
And it probably still has other minor grammatical errors. It's logic that really makes a difference. But I didn't like the way things were phrased, and I'll go back and re-edit my stuff. I have no problem doing that.
But this is this is a problem you get with lacktheism,
nothing's changed
right?
with that.
Lacktheism, saying I don't believe you, I don't believe you, I don't believe you, isn't something that anybody can chew on. That's not something that you haven't refuted anything. Just because you're saying you're wrong, you're wrong. Well, that's fine. But if you can't show me how I'm wrong and explain why and how you think I'm wrong, or show me exactly in what ways something or someone is wrong, you're not right.
Yeah, and it's very egocentric too. It's like, Leo, you haven't met your burden of proof. You haven't convinced me yet. Everything revolves around convincing me. If I was atheist, my atheism, my lack of belief is revolved around you meeting your burden of proof and you having to convince me. What arrogance! That is so egocentric.
Yeah. I did really quickly. Chesh, were you about to quote Arwen Ra there? If you can't show it, you don't know it. I do like that quote.
That's the last
thing
I think I've ever said to Arwen Ra on
right.
Facebook before he blocked me, because he was telling me it was a double negative. He thought it was, and I'm like, that's not a double negative. Everybody else was telling me it was not a double negative.
The not P being a double negative. I don't understand. That's not how formal logic.
I also don't like it when people
try. Show me, and I was like, if you don't know it, if you can't show it, you don't know it, and he blocked me.
I mean, that's a good line to get blocked on.
I agree. I was
It's
I
true.
like that. That's a good last line. But I also don't like it when people try to enforce rules of current English onto logical proofs, because that's just not sensical. That's really just not the way logical language functions. Like, if you call math a language and you call an equation a phrase or a sentence, then a logical phrase or a logical proof or a logical sentence does not function in the same way, doesn't follow the same grammar rules as it necessarily would in any other language, especially since half of the terms are Latin. So shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more modality to it than you would find present in your colloquial language.
Right.
And that just because this is something I see all the time. I mean, I see it a lot from atheists, but I see it from everybody. It's this, oh, well, I understand logic, rama ding dong. And I'm just like, but there's a distinction here. There's a difference between saying I understand logic and what you mean is I know what it means to think logically. I would grant that most humans can do that to some degree. There's a distinction between that and understanding logic as a formal subject. Those are not the same thing.
I also think that people confuse logic and common sense.
And reason.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, because when I hear somebody say, look, believing in God is not logical, it drives me nuts. It's like, what? Yeah. You may not find it rational, you might not find it justifiable, you might find it to be an error in a false belief, but to say it's not logical, that is a category error.
Yep. Yeah, well, logic and reason are the same thing. No, logic is a formalized system for how you reason. It isn't reason itself.
Or the jump to an attack.
It can be illogical.
Cheshire and I are going to be working on it. I don't know if she read my thing, but I want to work on a level 2 version of that argument.
He doesn't tell me these things directly. I just have to follow him on.
She's supposed to be psychic with me, because I mean, I like what we did, and that works. But I think it gives kind of a wrong impression because there's multiple burdens going on at once, and it's very simplistic. But it is true. It works. I mean.
It has to be. It's like a very simple, straightforward to get the ball rolling, to get people who don't even understand this before you can get because a lot of people like to argue add meme or argue add, look, here's a little visual that explains it. Look here, you're welcome. Here is a visual to help you explain it. This is just scratching the surface.
I love it. I get visuals with no source whatsoever. Right? Looks like it was a shitty paint shop job that somebody made, and I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Here's the thing.
I drew in crayon.
I am all for people adding to dialogue. I like the fact that I have added to the discussions among atheists and theists, and whether you agree with my arguments or not, people do talk about them. And
that's undeniable.
Yeah, and so the like the Venn.
He's the worst pirate I've ever heard of, but you have heard of him.
Exactly. Yeah, Steve sucks, but at least you know his name.
Steve is the Jack Sparrow of philosophers.
Somebody will take my place eventually, right? But like
I had that discussion once. It was terrifying. I was in a group with like a bunch of PhDs and masters in various degrees of science, and they were asking me questions about philosophy, and I'm like, I do art. I'm going to become Steve.
Now you know how I feel.
Just wait for her hair to turn. It'll happen.
What decisions did I make that led
very
me
poor
here?
Ones. Very poor
Now
ones.
you know how I felt in a Discord call with like 4 other theoretical physicists and cosmologists. I understood about, and I'd like to think that I'm reasonably well informed on the subject. I understood maybe 60% of what they were saying.
But
it gave me the opportunity to ask questions.
The McRae-Knoll diagram has added to the conversation. Still, nobody has refuted that. Right. And so like what Josh and I came up with for his argumentation theory is a very simplistic way of understanding what we were talking about. And by the way, it's well supported. She's read the literature. I've sent her things. It's people have said, "Oh, Steve has
I read the stuff he sends me."
Yeah, I noticed underneath is that, you know how you could tell if somebody's looked at something? It's never looked. She never sees it. But people are like, "Oh, Steve has this wacky view of things," or Steve made up these symbols. And I'm like, none of this is made up. This is all my work is predicated upon works of other. We all stand on shoulders of giants. I've never admitted to anybody in any way that my arguments are like completely, de novo. Of course not, right? Because they're not de novo. They're derivative, just like most arguments. But they are new in the regard of they added something new that wasn't prior.
See, everybody, Steve just said he's wrong.
Wasn't that on Twitter? Like I think you worded something in logical phraseology, I guess I'll use, and it had like the for all and the there exists a symbol in it, the is an element of symbol in it, and somebody commented and said that you were just like pulling symbols out of your ass and making shit up. I literally laughed out loud when I read that.
I was trying to explain.
Looks like Greek to me.
I was trying to explain.
But the funny thing is that earlier in that thread, that same guy said he knew logic.
Well, like, for example, people use the definition, right? They'll say the definition of atheism. And my arguments are there are no the definitions for general parlance words, right? But there are specific prescriptive definitions. For example, the definition of even is literally 2n, where n is the element of z, which means that for every element of z, which is an integer, that is 2 times that, you end up with an even number. That is the mathematical definition of an even number. It's prescriptive, right? I'm not making up n as an element of z. That means that's a natural number that's in the element that's in the set of integers, right? But that's a prescriptive definition. So you can say, according to the definition of even numbers, that makes sense.
Yep. I agree.
I also notice that people will jump to, if you say, hey, that's not logical, or that's not reasonable, they jump to that you're saying that they as a person are not logical or reasonable, which they then jump to, oh, well, you're saying I'm stupid, or you're saying I have no reason, and you're saying that my belief... It's like nobody said that.
Yeah. They take everything too personally these days.
Well, and they just, if they don't understand something, they try to denigrate you. They're like, "Oh, you're a troll," or "You just made this shit up," and it's just like, and this is why on Facebook I'm a little bit different, because I don't take a lot of those people seriously by any stretch of imagination. But they're not my following, right? They're not the people that I give a shit about. I test my arguments on Facebook groups because I want to get a sample size of the people that don't know fuck all compared to the people that do, and get different inputs. Matter of fact, if you notice, Leo, because you're in various groups, if I put some of the things I wrote in the Great Debate Community group, it's a hell of a lot better responses than I'll get in an atheist group where they just go, you're wrong.
I
think definitely.
Theism has been around longer, and so I think they're probably a little bit better at dealing with scrutiny and dealing with multiple positions within the same group. So you can say like, oh yeah, we're atheists, and there's this group of Christians, this group of Christians, this group of, and now that's not to say that there weren't like bloody wars over it. There were people that were killed over stuff like this. It's just atheism hasn't really existed as a group like it does now before, as far as I'm aware. Especially with the way social media is.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the initial New Atheist group wasn't trying to create any kind of cohesion. They were trying to create a separation of church and state, and they were trying to point out the issues with religion and organized religion and their interference. But now you've got a political group of atheists trying to insert atheist ideology into politics, which is religion in politics. The irony.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. Is that atheism itself is not a religion, although there are people of atheist. There are atheist religions, but there's certainly religiosity in the atheist community.
It's that they want. There's dogmatism, but if you want to remove religion, like church and state, by saying let's put atheists in there, you're part of the problem. Because that's inserting somebody that has a specific religious belief. They're not religion, they're not religious, but they have an idea about religion. And so inserting them in there is part of the problem, because it's just the same thing on the opposite side of the coin.
Well, I will agree with you to a point.
I think for many atheists, myself included, the reason that I personally want to see atheists in office and that I promote that is is because of a lack of representation up until now.
Sure, I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the thing.
It's misdefining it as removal of church and state, because that's not putting somebody of a specific religion or a lack of a certain religion into a position into a political position, is still basing it off of their religious belief or lack of religious belief, because they're not basing their belief system on this, that, or the other thing. The answer is essentially that nobody wins with the way things are functioning, like the way they're trying to do things.
All right, let me ask you this.
So,
go ahead. I thought you had a thought.
As I say, normalizing atheism is the best way to do that. I see no problem with normalizing atheism. And running a platform based on secularist ideals or humanism is way better than you're ever going to get with something like atheism, because you don't have to be an atheist to be a humanist. Yeah, you don't have to be an atheist to be a secularist.
I would argue this way. First of all, who would you rather see in office? Somebody like Grandma Oppie or Randolph Richardson? They're both atheist, right? One happens to be a complete moron. And it's not Grand Oppie. And so it's not a matter of the fact that they're atheist or not. I think that I'd be fine with a theist.
I'm talking about as a political.
That wants separation of church and state. If they're a secularist, I don't give a damn whether they're a theist or an atheist. Again, it's not either one of them should have any preference. It is a secularism that I support. Right? I want separation of church and state, and I think that a lot of atheists and theists both obviously do as well.
It becomes an issue because people are refusing to vote an atheist in because of their religious affiliation or lack of affiliation.
Yes.
And so you want to push to undo that stigma, which is fine. But if you have a political movement, if you have a group of people that are trying to push ideals based on not religion instead of based on humanism or based on secularism, and not alienate all of the agnostic, deists, theists, Christians, don't alienate those people out. Bring them in, because there's a lot of theists out there who also want a separation of church and state.
That's my point, yes.
Right. Yeah. So if they don't focus on the atheist part and focus on don't be an asshole and do good, even though you're an atheist, and go back to that, which is where I think most of this initially started, instead of let's just push what we as atheists say is the moral right thing to do in office, which is still the same thing. That's the reason for the church and state separation.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And look, if there are groups that promote secularism and promote ethics in office and things like that, I don't give a damn whether they're atheist, or agnostic. That again, it's the point is that they want laws to be out there that are not contingent upon religious predications. I'm okay with that. That's what I'm for. Anybody who says, look, we should teach like the controversy of young earth creationism, there's no controversy. It's wrong. Yet it doesn't belong in the school system. And anybody who advocates for the school system, I'm going to fight against.
If you're going to teach the controversy, it ought to be in debate class, because since it's an easy topic to to show fallacies,
that's
or
a
philosophy. It should be in that kind of case, not in a case. But I'm just saying you could give them what they want, but not exactly what they want.
Like
a
debate class. I mean, that's the whole point of debate.
Yeah,
is learning
exactly.
how to debate. Might as well take something easy. But I'd rather have a theist as an ally and say, yeah, Steve, I don't want younger creationism taught in school either. This is why I tend to get along with the more academic types, because I think they all have the same kind of perspective. They, for example, like Hugh Ross, he doesn't want younger creationism taught in school.
Exactly. Yeah.
Matter of fact, it was great because I talked to him again a little bit after the show again, and I don't know if you guys remember, but he was on the John Ackerman show. Is that how I pronounce it? Yeah. Go. And it was the first time he had ever talked live with Kent Hovind, and he didn't know anything about this guy. He wasn't told anything about Kent, right? The Ackerman show was the Ackerman show. And so I already kind of knew this story a little bit. He kind of told me a little bit about it before, but not to the degree that he told me today. But I was always wondering why he was so like, who is this guy? So he went on the show. He saw Dr. Dino with his little toy dinosaur things and stuff like that, and he thought it was being punked there for like 10 minutes. He was just like, this guy can't be serious. And then he realized that about 10 minutes into the conversation before that Kent was serious. And then he just blew him out of the water because it was one of the greatest discussions that I've ever seen. But yeah, for the beginning, he did not take Kent. He was like, who is this guy? And I could tell by watching this, but now that I've actually known Kent and I know Hugh, it's like, yes, that makes so much sense that he just didn't know what the hell was going on. He's like, I went in there to kind of talk to this guy. They said, hey, this guy wants to talk about this particular subject. And he's like, why does he have little dinosaurs here? What's going on with that? It was great. Oh.
I don't know. I think that there's just a better way to do things, and I think the way that and I think the way things initially started was probably the more conducive and proactive and pragmatic way to do things. But things have shifted so much by getting involved in trying to give atheism a political stance on a lot of things that all atheists are going to have different opinions on.
Yeah, and they don't recognize that too, right?
And what they ought to have done is they ought to have separated things out into humanism, and they ought to have essentially branched. Still have your shows about atheism and keep them about that, and saying, hey, it's totally fine to be an atheist, and it's totally fine to be like, you're not a bad person if you don't believe whatever, and that's fine, and keep that going. And then also then at the same time start these secular humanist based political grassroots or charities or whatever, and invite everybody to those things, because they don't, and let don't exclude anybody, because you're going to, the best way to get people to understand that just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you're a bad person is by letting them interact with you and not being a shithead on the internet, because you being a shithead on the internet does the exact opposite of all the work you initially started to do, all the work that you're aiming for, especially since so many political campaigns have started moving to the internet.
Really quickly, I just wanted to say, my camera's off. I'm still here. I'm eating, but I didn't want to leave the call, so I'm going to leave my camera off. But I am back.
Okay. Yeah, no, I happen to agree with them. I think one of the mistakes they made is that they added in a lot of that atheism plus stuff. Because on some of those talk shows, call-in shows, it's all about social issues any longer. It's not even the atheism. Well, that's why it should have.
They could have hosted it off of the atheism stuff, but don't make it about atheism. Make it about secularism. Make it about humanism. So if you want to say like, hey, listen, this is how here's ideas to help you raise your kid in a way that's more conducive to allowing them to make that decision on their own instead of putting too much pressure on them early.
Yeah, well, they tried something like that. Secular sexuality, they called it, or something?
They also did a parenting one that I thought was really interesting. And it was just, it focused too much on the atheism and was too niche and denied and treated theists and people who believed poorly instead of inviting them in, because I wouldn't doubt that there are parents out there who want to help their kids and bring their kids up in a good and fair environment. Some people don't want to push their religion as a parent onto their kid, even though they are theists. So when just because you're an atheist doesn't suddenly mean you're the only one who wants secularism. Doesn't mean you're the only one who wants humanism thing. I would probably actually say that most outside of like the grand vocal minority that is like you get in the Bible Belt, you have like most people, when you speak to them on a one-to-one basis, want what they believe is the most humanist thing most of the time. And so a lot, even the people who are like pro-lifers, I like to call them anti-choicers, but that's just that's sassy. They want that because they think it's the most humanist option. Telling them that their God isn't real is a non sequitur to whether or not you believe abortion should or should not. So have the discussion about that in a way that is conducive to everyone having the discussion, because just because you believe in a God or not will not dictate whether or not you think something is necessary. It might be where you're coming from, but it's not going to necessarily dictate. Your mind can be changed without changing this over here about whatever political topic or SJW topic this may or may not be.
Yeah, when we've seen younger creationists change their minds. They still, they still, believe in God. Some of them, but no longer younger creationism. Let me kind of segue a little bit if I can, because people know that we're doing a new call-in thing. And by the way, people have asked about it. People have like, hey, I've heard you doing this. I did make the new intro, right? I think I did. I know, but anyways, we have changed the name. It's going to be Judgment Call. I love that name. But we need to figure out. We need to figure out how we're going to get it marketed, and how we're going to get the audience to share, to have people call in and talk, because it's a call-in show. So I want to get people's opinions on how do you recommend we go about doing that? Because we're all here.
Are you asking me?
I mean, I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on like the format. Are you looking for like somebody that just calls in briefly, like an atheist experience, or somebody that comes on as a guest?
Yeah, briefly. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's going to be like, you're wrong, I'm going to hang up on you. That's going to be the format.
So you're going to do Matt Dillahunty style?
Yeah, I'm going to be the Matt approach. No, I mean, like Jim, you know a lot of people. How would you recommend that we get theist and atheist and neither, more, both? It doesn't matter. Just anybody that wants to talk about certain topics to get it out there. And I mean, we usually don't have a problem with callers, because we say we're going to do an hour show. It turns to 90 minutes, turns to 2 hours.
The problem we have with callers is that we don't shut up.
It's hard. Well, I mean, you're not supposed to shut up. It's a call-in show.
We just get going, and because people are used to like call-in shows like the Atheist Experience, that they're not supposed to talk when we're talking. It's like, no, jump in. If me and Steve are going, just jump in. Yeah. Just jump in unless we tell you to shut the fuck up.
I don't think you guys have a problem with with talking to people or anything like that, or engagement. I think the biggest problem that you guys would have would be exposure.
Well, that's what we're saying. Yes, exposure. We want to be exposed. How do we get exposed?
Jim, you're the professional
Jim,
here.
Us. Yes.
I could give an idea.
Sure.
For every recording that you do, I would post it as a VOD to your channel, and then say you've got 6 callers in 2 hours. So I'm just pulling numbers out. Take 2 or 3 of those callers and post it, re-upload it to your channel as a segment. This is something that I've seen a lot of streamers do this. I think the Atheist Experience does this with their call-in shows. I think that's the best way
to
really like put things out there.
Segment.
Yeah, if somebody, if you know that you had a caller call in that you know the discussion was not necessarily disrespectful, but was a little bit more heated or a little bit more animated, clip that out and re-upload it. That way people can see specifically that helps with and it's a continuous stream of content to the channel or the channels, however many it gets posted to. And I think that helps with exposure, but also advertising as like, atheist, if you've got, I don't care what you believe. If you've got something and I disagree with it, come on, let's go, bring yourself, bring your argument. Let's see what you got.
Another good idea would be to get something that's a little more digestible to people who don't want to fully invest themselves in like a full episode, and weekly or monthly make a compilation video of not even the entire conversations, but just the best clips from the conversations.
Yeah, that's fine. The thing is, we need callers, right? Now, I mean, What I'm thinking is maybe tomorrow or the next day, at some point Cheshire and I will get together. We'll put the new video out with the new name, and we'll have everybody just share that video everywhere and tell, hey, look, there's a new call-in show, Judgment Call. We'll get your opinion on stuff and ask everybody that we know to help promote it in some way. Right?
Incentivizing helps. If you guys want to give away merchandise or something like that, say, hey, we're going to give merchandise away to one of our callers today. Yeah.
You could wear a mankini like Math Pig did on one of his streams for New Year because he hit a K subscribers.
Can we get a video of Steve doing a dance and then he gets up during the dance and he's like, no, he's not doing it. He's got to
do it in a mankini though.
And he's doing one of these and then he gets up and it just turns into a.
Yep.
I think Smitty's not watching. He would have probably had porn.
And then it's we edit in words, so it's theist, atheist, Colin.
As long as he does it in a mankini, I'll tell you what, Steve will hit 100K subscribers.
Oh God! If we, if you could go into your
and then we do
transcripts
one
and you
where
can
I
look
grab
for
my
certain
boobs
words.
and it's flat Earth, young Earth, young Earth, Colin. And it's got a worse popping up.
The funny thing is, unironically, that's not a bad idea.
And it's got some psychedelic zooming in back and forth really fast.
Act now.
With it's act now, and it just shows the channel name, and it just
and for a
subscribe.
Bonus, you get a navel.
And then Steve turns around and twerks, and it just says subscribe on his ass.
Oh man!
Like I said. Unironically, those are good ideas.
It just has,
Smitty's here.
It just has the YouTube subscribe button superimposed on his butt cheek.
Yeah.
Yes.
People says, yes, hung jury would be too sexist.
No, put the subscribe button over a picture of Steve's. He would take a picture of his bare ass. Hold on.
And Smitty shows up.
He would take a picture of his bare ass, but then we put the subscribe button over it, and then it says, "Hit that button.
Hit
it hard.
Oh my God.
Smack that subscribe.
Smack it
So
hard.
Steve's doing this with subscribes on his ass, and I'm just smack that, smack that subscribe button.
Smack that subscribe button. Smack it so it turns redder.
Oh man.
Yeah,
I think we have a good I think we have a good advertising campaign here.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, you're
Definitely.
the audio video. Oh my! I forgot to ask you, Chesh. Did what was his name? Oh my goodness. Did somebody send you a short little clip of my graphics before and then your graphics after?
No.
You didn't see that?
No.
I asked him to send it, but I don't think you have Steam.
I haven't logged into Steam. I'll go look.
Yeah, look on Steam. See if you got a message from somebody from Steam.
Okay.
It was classic. It was really good. See if you could find that.
What was it about?
That'd be a great.
You have to see
campaign.
it. It's hard to just. I don't know how to download it. Does Steam always update?
It updates every time because there's new ads.
Yeah, Steam and Skype update every single time.
The only program I have on my laptop that upgrades all the time is my Reflector 3 that I use to reflect my iPad screen onto my MacBook.
I don't know what God Radity said. Can you interpolate that for me?
No, I have no idea what that means. Closed captioning versions. Can't walk out in the public. If I listen to you, I will never need V, but I don't know what V is.
I do not play. I'm gonna read it in what I would consider to be grammatically correct. I do not play your videos with you in them with the volume on. I can only do the closed captioned version. I cannot walk out in public. If I listen to you, I will never need TV. That would be what I would get out of that, but I don't.
Did you get a message on that or no?
I have one unread chat.
Okay, let me.
Did anybody see Kim Omaki's comment in the live chat? His most recent, their most recent comment.
I got a message, but it's unrelated.
No, it should be from King Browser Copa. Here, I got the YouTube video. Watch on YouTube, and yet it doesn't do anything. Ah.
Oh, Viagra.
Let me see here.
If I listen to you, I will never need Viagra.
Oh.
Your voice is hot. There you go, Steve. That's what they meant.
Okay.
Oh, it's that she. Oh, that's who it is. Okay, so here. Let me send it to you. This is his video, and I'll show it for everybody here in a second.
Or they're saying that there's no chance of getting laid listening to Steve.
Oh,
there's no way of getting a boner. They need help.
Oh, you'll get a boner.
I get that.
I think he's saying that he likes I should say they like Steve's voice, so they don't need well, I'm assuming they're a male. If they're taking Viagra, I'm assuming they're a man. I
just take it. I don't take it medically. I just take it recreationally.
I'm just a casual Viagra.
I'm a casual user.
You know what? Now, I only take Viagra
snort
on
it.
the weekends. All right.
I'm mainline Viagra.
By the way, Chesh, did you read Kimo Maki's most recent comment?
If there ever were a night for Chesh to wear yoga pants with juicy on the butt, this would have been it. I don't own a pair of yoga pants that say douchey.
You will.
Juicy on the.
You know what I want?
It's like velvet, like felt kind of feeling.
I do have like these are like kind of like that, but they're fuzzy ones. They're a little bit thick.
I want the sweatpants that Vosh wears. That on the front of them they're black, and then right in the front it says in like big ass bold white letters, "Stop looking at my dick."
All right, let me play this video real quick. You can watch from the outside, okay? So,
yep.
Did
you send it to me?
I sent you the link. Yeah. So people on the outside are watching the video right now. It's my graphics before and your graphics after.
That's hilarious.
Did you see it on the outside?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
shit.
This is what, because I said I had, I'll kind of lay it out, and then she kind of took it and ran with it. So this is my artistic capability. That's classic. Oh God, I thought that was hilarious.
That's brilliant.
Which one of these did Kyle do?
People are creative, man. I gotta tell you.
That is true.
Yeah, my creativity is extremely limited. That's why I need people that are have better skill sets than I on certain things, because my creativity is limited.
Fucking Smitty. I'm listening to Steve and I have a boner.
Yeah, well,
it's not related to Steve, but still.
So he says.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Oh my God, you guys remember Fable was a game?
Fable, I've heard of it.
Yeah,
the only
awesome.
computer game I ever really played was RuneScape.
Fable was
it was awesome.
an Xbox game.
Oh.
Yeah, it was the only one that I really got into, and I go through the entire thing. I try to be as evil as possible, and then try to be as good as possible.
Gotta find the Fable that came on the Xbox 360 was you gotta find all those laughy ass gargoyle assholes.
Yeah, but that was way back in the day.
Yeah. I'm dating myself.
Wow.
Congratulations, you're a lucky woman.
You're not that old.
Dating myself with Fable on the Xbox.
I don't even know why I'm
360.
saying you're not that old. I should just say you're not old. You're not even remotely close to old.
I'm 17.
If you don't,
my life is basically over.
What was that, Jim? Did something happen to Jim? Guys, I think I might need oh no, he's still there. All right.
Oh, you cut out. What did you say?
Yeah, you started talking, but then all of it.
Oh, I don't remember what I said.
He's been snorting Viagra. He's not quite there.
I was gonna say, if you don't know who Smarter Child is on AOL chat, then you're not old.
Well, one of the
I don't know who that is.
I don't know either. One of the comments.
I never had an AOL.
One of the comments,
or you're too old.
One of my comments in my argument, somebody said, "Again with your gibberish nonsense. No one cares about and proves nothing worth anybody's time." And I'm like, brilliant refutation. It's like you go out of your way to demonstrate you don't understand the arguments. It's just bizarre. They really do. They go out of their way because I mean, look, it's like If you understand it, refute it. If you don't, then you just demonstrated you don't even understand the argument, and you go out of your way to look stupid. I don't understand this.
I just found out what game Steve should play.
RuneScape?
It's an RPG open world base building story rich game for $28.99 Canadian, so probably like $25 American or $2, whatever. It's
50 cents.
It's called Hobo Tough Life.
Wow.
Do it, Steve.
I'm looking at it as a survival game. That's some weird graphics. It's got mostly positive. Very positive.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Anybody here ever play Bloodborne?
With it, yeah.
Did you like it?
I had bad experiences with Bloodborne and sort of stopped playing it after a couple minutes because
bad gaming experience or bad like experiences because of the content in the game psychologically.
Bad gaming experience.
Okay.
Like the game is fine. I just had a bad experience with the people that were around while I was playing it, and it just kind of turned me off the game entirely. So I just stopped playing it.
Because Vosh, he just completed the game. He beat the final boss like last week. Played it, and I mean it looks interesting. I didn't, but he never really talked about like the gameplay, and I could watch it, but I figured I'd ask if anybody here's ever played it, if they had any opinions on it.
Oh, it's definitely good. It's very story rich. It's got a lot to it if you know where to look and what to look for. But it's definitely worth a buy if you like the Dark Souls series, if you like that kind of gameplay and that kind of story. It is difficult.
Same creators, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's not as difficult as the Dark Souls because you have dodge. You have a dodge roll.
Yep.
I have to take off though, so I'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah, I'm going to be ending this in a few anyways. I just want to do a quick recap here. How many of you guys have gone over and actually watched the Agree to Argue thing? And by the way, I just went over there to check it out. It's like 7 our spam things. No, but and fake accounts. I mean, and they're just promoting links, but I mean, I've already removed them and stuff, but it's just like, I hate these spam bots. They're just ridiculous, but it's so funny in the description is imagine a puddle waking up one morning and thinking, this is an interesting world I find myself in, an interesting hole that I find myself in. It fits me rather neatly, doesn't it? In fact, it fits me staggeringly well. It must have been made to have me in it. And then Douglas Adams wrote that, and he also wrote, and then, the sun comes out and, to the much of the dismay of the puddle, he realizes it's not really made for him and he just suddenly vanishes and is very upset by that kind of fact. But we never got into the puddle thing. That was kind of surprising. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm caffeinated out. I think it's about time for me to eat and go to bed. But Leo and Jim, thank you for joining us.
Dude, it's 7:00 p.m.
I've been going to bed.
I forget. I forget you're
8 o'clock
old.
last night, man. I went to bed. I even said, hey, on Twitter, I'm going to bed. If you look, I didn't. For 9 hours, I was crashed out. So I've been going to bed kind of early. I'm old.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, I usually stay up all night, and I'm trying to get back in a better routine.
You said you wanted to do a rum and coke this Saturday?
Yeah, well, I was going to get that one guy who does quantum mechanics stuff. I haven't heard back from him, but I'll figure out something. I might do more on my my semantic collapse argument. But that's philosophy stuff. But I would like to get a guy that actually knows a lot about a physicist, an actual PhD in quantum mechanics to come in. And have a cool discussion on it, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the terminology very well of what
I can tell you that they don't at all.
They don't. I mean, and by the way, I'll leave you guys with this: that whole if you don't understand quantum mechanics, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't. That's not what that's meant by that. It's the reason people think that way is only because if you think you know how to interpret quantum mechanics, you don't. There are people that understand quantum mechanics. It's not a matter of understanding it. It's a matter of, if you think you can interpret it, like we had talked about earlier, which model to use. You think you understand how you can interpret this? That's the problem. Scientists are not sure how to interpret quantum mechanics sometimes.
Yeah, it's about understanding it from an ontological perspective, not an epistemological perspective.
All right, Jim, you got anything to leave us with? You want to promote anything?
No, just thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, man. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you guys. We'll talk to you later.
All right,
peace out.
All right, guys. I will wrap it up. Anything? A couple things I got going on, just to leave you. On the 21st, I will be on Brittany Simon's channel. We're going to be talking about spirituality. And on the 24th, I'm going to be on, I'm not going to shout it out yet, but I'm going to be on a channel that has 300,000 subs, and we're going to be talking about the Non Sequitur show, Fiasco. So it's going to be back in the limelight. When you have a channel with 300,000 subs that has been following this for a very long time, we might get a little more people renewed into the discussion of what happened with the Non Sequitur show, rather than what, the story, the other side that was all demonstrated to be bullshit. So